Welcome to the session on contemporary socio-political philosophy. Here we shall discuss freedom and equality according to Swami Vivekananda. Contemporary socio-political philosophy in India can be explained in terms of certain peculiarities. Now, let us look into some peculiarities. First one, positive attitude towards the world. Contemporary Indian thinkers conceive the world as a positive entity and hence they reject asceticism and negative attitude towards the world. Classical Indian philosophy, holding on to the theory of Mayavada, considered that the world is not a fit abode for the self. Hence, they emphasized asceticism and renunciation of the worldly life. But contemporary Indian thinkers provide a more humanistic approach to the worldly life. The world is not an evil and self-realization does not signify a state of loneliness of the self. Self-realization is not a state of dissociation of the self from the world. For the contemporary thinkers, spiritual evolution is a state of higher life with greater powers of consciousness and omnipotence. When a person attains self-perfection, his life is dedicated to the service of humanity. He tries to transform the world and change its very structure. Hence, the contemporary Indian thinkers visualize a positive conception of world. Second one, synthetic and integral outlook. Contemporary Indian thought can be considered as a synthesis of East and West because it has grown up in an environment of the Western civilization and philosophy, culture and religion. They show a much wider outlook in that they are rooted in the past while there is assimilation of Western thought. Ancient thought is often critically analyzed to make it more universally acceptable. Attempts were made to find the germs of modern scientific concepts in the Hindu scriptures. In ancient India, knowledge was regarded as an integrated whole. There was no sharp demarcation between religion, philosophy and natural sciences. Scientific concepts and application were scattered over religious scriptures and philosophical treatises. Many scientific concepts like conservation, transformation and dissipation of energy together with the doctrine of causation are found, though without experimental verification, in the ancient Hindu scriptures. These created a spirit of self-confidence and faith in the greatness of ancient Indian thought, and this served to awaken in their minds a keen desire for spiritual and national regeneration on the basis of the best in the past. Third, dynamism, openness and Catholicity. Contemporary Indian thinkers show liberal and dynamic approach towards the notion of religion. They stand for a Catholic religion which is open, dynamic, universal and all-embracing. They admit the essential unity of all religions, at the same time recognizing the existence of diversity among religions. Each religion has its value and serves society in a particular way. Further, they support comparative analysis of religion for a better understanding of them. A distinction is made between the spirit of religion and the body of religion. The myths, rites and rituals constitute the body of religion, whereas the spirit of religion consists in the intuitive experience of God. Therefore, they make a clear distinction between the spirit and body of religion and emphasize the supreme importance of the spirit of religion. Again, all contemporary Indian philosophers hold that a truly religious man is also a social reformer, and a true karma yogi, he actively works for the betterment of the society. Fourth, humanistic tendencies. The contemporary Indian philosophers show a deep appreciation of the problems of human life and the destiny of man. The vision of human life and the destiny of man remained a matter of profound concern for them. They take a significant concern for the worldly life and the well-being of the society. Therefore, they laid more stress on the values of life and their realization through social service, conception of brotherhood, and righteous action. Also provides importance to the development of man's ethical and social nature and to cultivate secular values along with spiritual values. The teachings like selfless action, surrender, dedicated service, and fight against evil, ignorance and injustice profoundly influence them to make the spiritual energy to work for the well-being of the society. Further, all the contemporary thinkers of India were influenced by Western traditions. They stand for a synthesis between the spiritual values of the East and the materialistic need of the West. They fully realize that India must assimilate the materialistic achievements and scientific progress of the West. To promote the welfare of India, it was essential that the positive sciences should be introduced in the line of Western education in the country, so that India could become politically, industrially and economically advanced. The modern Indian thinkers seek to build a bridge between the ancient wisdom of the East and scientific knowledge of the West, so that each may be enriched. Swami Vivekananda. An introduction. Narendranath Dutt, better known to the world as Swami Vivekananda, was a great Indian who took advantage of English education, yet remained loyal to Indian civilization. He graduated from the University of Kolkata, well acquainted with the Indian scriptures as well as Western thought. He happened to meet Swami Ramakrishna Paramahamsa in 1881, and after a period of initial doubt and resistance accepted him as his friend, philosopher and guide. The touch of Ramakrishna brought about a spiritual transformation in the personality and mental makeup of Vivekananda. He became an ascetic and a monk whose life and teachings have an important and outstanding bearing on the political and social history of India. He travelled extensively throughout the whole of India, so that he can have a direct experience of the social and economic conditions of the country. He came to feel that India, in spite of its rich spiritual heritage and very strong cultural history, had not been able to root out poverty, weakness and social evils, some of them due to orthodoxy and superstitions prevalent in the then society. Actually, his philosophy arises from the awareness of the social, religious and economic conditions of the Indian masses. Swami Vivekananda is usually considered as a man of religion, an ardent and forceful preacher of Vedanta, but his life and teachings were far ahead of his time. He was a Catholic in outlook, progressive in assimilating the truths of East and West, and a modernist with humanistic and spiritualistic approach to the problems of world and religion. Next is understanding freedom. Noted Indologist Louis Renaud once said, "The Indian mind is constantly seeking hidden correspondence between things which belong to entirely distinct conceptual systems. This remark is very much true in the case of most of the modern Indian political thinkers, for whom freedom is identifiable with several other qualities. Among them are self-realization, salvation, truth and harmony. Vivekananda made an important contribution to this formulation. He has attempted to incorporate the Western ideas of political and social liberty into the classical Indian conception of freedom as spiritual liberation. The crux of his development occurred with the interpretation of freedom not only at a spiritual state, but as the object of a continuing struggle. Freedom became a supreme value that was gradually fulfilled through an evolutionary process which rendered the attainment of freedom desirable at all levels of consciousness, political and social as well as moral and spiritual. This development had no precedent in classical Indian thought. Ancient India possesses no idea of political or social liberty. To the ancient Indian mind, realization of spiritual freedom had involved, among other things, leading a pure life, knowledge of the Vedas and devotion to a good guru. With the Western impact, the emphasis was changed. Attainment of spiritual freedom was now thought to be furthered by social and political liberty, vital stages in a grand quest for complete liberation. Indian thinkers from Vivekananda to Mahatma Gandhi speak of political freedom as external and spiritual freedom as internal. This implies a duality to the Western mind which is not intended. Their main point is that internal freedom complements external freedom. The latter is providing opportunity for growth, contributes to the development of the former, while spiritual freedom, as the culmination of the quest, the highest stage of the process, brings complete self-realization, perception of one's harmony with all being. Next is internal and external freedom. Sri Aurobindo, speaking of the ideals of liberty, equality and fraternity, says, "Three words have the power of remoulding nations and governments: liberty, equality and fraternity." These words cast forth into being from the great stir and moment of the 18th century continue to act on men because they point to the ultimate goal towards which human evolution ever moves. This liberty to which we progress is liberation out of a state of bondage. We move from a state of bondage to an original liberty. This is what our own religion teaches. This is what our own philosophy suggests as the goal towards which we move, mukti or moksha. We are bound in the beginning by a lapse from pre-existent freedom. We strive to shake off the bonds. We move forward and forward until we have achieved the ultimate emancipation, that utter freedom of the soul, of the body or the whole man, that utter freedom from all bondage towards which humanity is always aspiring. We in India have found a mighty freedom within ourselves. Our brethren in Europe have worked towards freedom without. We have been moving on parallel lines towards the same end. They have found out the way to external freedom. We have found out the way to internal freedom. We meet and give to each other what we have gained. We have learned from them to aspire after external as they have learned from us to aspire after internal freedom. The close correspondence of internal with external freedom is well brought out in this passage. Also, an acknowledgement of India's indebtedness to the West for the idea of the freedom is well expressed. Aurobindo and Vivekananda extended the Indian tradition to underwrite a value foreign to that tradition, but in the process this value was given traditional support. This is probably the most important statement for his political thought that Vivekananda made on the idea of freedom. His first definition of liberty is our natural right to be allowed to use our own body, intelligence or wealth according to our will, without doing any harm to no excuse may be found for its deprivation in the interest of an omniscient few. Liberty of opportunity for all becomes Vivekananda's first demand, but he goes beyond this religion which others had not explored. Vivekananda easily assimilated a Western idea to a traditional Indian concept, yet was perfectly aware of the distinction between the two. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of this mental transition occurs with the shift in usage from liberty, which is more of a Western flavor, to freedom, which for Vivekananda at least was always the broader term, inclusive of all types of liberty as well as of spiritual freedom. He said, to advance oneself towards freedom, physical, mental and spiritual, and help others to do so is the supreme prize of man. As a reformist thinker, Vivekananda's words are significant. To the reformers, I will point out that I am a greater reformer than any one of them. They want to reform only little bits. I want root and branch reform. Where we differ is in the method. Vivekananda was no less a champion of social, religious and intellectual liberty than Indian liberals of his time. Liberty of thought and action is the only condition of life, of growth and well-being. Where it does not exist, the man, the race, the nation must go down. Caste or no caste, creed or no creed, any man or class or caste or nation or institution which bars the power of free thought and action of an individual, even so long as that power does not injure others, is devilish and must go down. But Vivekananda's method involved a serious theoretical attempt at assimilation of traditional Indian concepts. It was with this method, believing in reform but insisting in a natural evolution, that he turned to a consideration of the idea of freedom and eventually adopted it as the dominant concept of his thought. He said, there is one wonderful philosophy connected with our lives, without which who will be able to live, who will be able to enjoy life a moment? The idea of freedom. This is the idea that guides each footstep of ours, makes our moments possible, determines our relations to each other, nay, is a very warp and woof in the fabric of human life. Concept of freedom according to Vivekananda. The real nature of man is freedom. According to Vivekananda, freedom is not a quality or character belonging to the soul. Freedom constitutes the very essence of the soul. At the same time, he believes in the law of karma, which says that our actions produce tendencies that determines our future lives. Man normally performs his actions out of ignorance, forgets his own true nature and fails to distinguish between right and wrong actions. Such actions create the tendencies which determine his future. Now, the question is, if man's entire personality is determined by his karma tendency, how can we say that man is free? Vivekananda deals with this problem. Firstly, freedom and karma are not incompatible. He says, freedom does not mean absence of all kinds of determining factors. Freedom is not no determination. It means self-determination, which means that the agent is determined not by anything else but by himself only. Secondly, the final escape rests entirely on man's actions. By his own good deeds, he can win over ignorance and suffering and attain freedom. Vivekananda also looks at the problem in the Vedantic way by saying that the incompatibility of karma and freedom is only apparent and not real, a delusion caused by ignorance. Man can finally win over this delusion to realize that the soul was never in bondage. Next is freedom and immortality. The concepts of freedom and immortality have been derived from the unity of metaphysics and axiology. These are the characteristics of human being. The Indian tradition speaks of man as nothing but the self, and liberation is the ultimate goal of all human beings. The soul is unchangeable and pure. Immortality is not the nature of mundane life. Man's immortality follows from his freedom. The drama of present life is not the last in the journey of man. He had a pre-human past and post-human future. Vivekananda says, freedom is inseparably connected with immortality. To be free, one must be above the laws of nature. Law exists so long as we are ignorant. When knowledge comes, then we find that law is nothing but freedom in ourselves. Freedom means immortality. Man has a body which is governed by natural laws. Hence, real freedom is not possible for the body, but man is essentially spiritual. Therefore, instead of subordinating ourselves to material needs, we should seek freedom from matter. The self is free as well as immortal. Next is freedom and equality. For Vivekananda, freedom is linked with equality. He says, evil comes from differences. All good comes from faith in equality, in the underlying oneness and sameness of things. This is the great Vedantic ideal. Freedom is meaningless without equality. Equality is a way to freedom, inequality the way to bondage. No man and no nation can attempt to gain freedom without mental equality. Now, let us summarize what we have discussed so far. We have discussed that Swami Vivekananda is a great reformist and religionist who exerted great influence on the contemporary socio-political philosophy of India. He attempted to interpret the concept of freedom from the Advaitic point of view as not only a political concept, but a metaphysical concept as well. Freedom does not simply mean liberty as understood by the Western mind. It meant liberation or freedom from bondage, and in this sense, it is immortality or final freedom. We have also studied that, according to him, freedom is a very basic nature of man, as man is not simply a material body, but also a spirit or soul whose very essence is freedom. He concludes his discussion on freedom by adding that equality is the basis of freedom, whether it is for man or nation. Before we go to the next session, please try to work out the given assignments. First one, explain the attitude of openness and Catholicity noticed among the social thinkers of modern India. Second, comment on Vivekananda as social reformer. Third, discuss the concept of freedom according to Vivekananda. Fourth, bring out the relation between freedom and equality in Vivekananda. Fifth, examine the role of Advaita Vedanta in Vivekananda's political ideas. Here are a few reference books for further study. Swami Vivekananda, Patriot and Prophet, written by Datta BN, published by Kolkata Navbharat Publishers, 1954. Second, Swami Vivekananda and the Indian Renaissance, written by T. M. P. Mahadevan, published by Sri Ramakrishna Mission Vidyalaya Teachers College, Coimbatore, 1965. Third, Complete Works of Swami Vivekananda, Volume 1 to 6, published by Advaita Ashram, Kolkata, 1984. Fourth, The Life of Vivekananda and the Universal Gospel, written by Romain Roland, published by Advaita Ashram, Kolkata, 1965. Fifth, The Hindu Nationalist Movement in India, written by Christopher Jefferlot, published by Columbia University Press, New York, 1993. Hope you have enjoyed this session. See you next time. Until then, bye.